Hi Ben. Hey everybody. So this is the Odyssey for Writers Part 1. I'm not going to be talking about the movie. I haven't seen it yet. Nolan's Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. This is all going to be how I got unstuck from my rewrite with Homer's Odyssey. And it all came from a key from Michael Pollan. So you and I had been talking for a while about my character want and how I just couldn't nail it. I couldn't figure out this character want. And my movie just, it didn't feel right. Something was missing, something was wrong, something was going haywire, and I just couldn't nail this rewrite, and I didn't know what it was. So I was thinking about the things that I've been reading this year, like the Iliad, like the Odyssey, like King Arthur and his Knights, Galahad and the Grail, and even The Hobbit that I reread with Danielle, which was great. But it wasn't until that I heard this interview with Michael Pollan on the podcast, How I Write, that really unlocked what it is that you had been trying to tell me this entire time. So I was listening to Why I Write, and Michael Pollan was saying for his nonfiction work, he structures everything as a journey. Because for him, with this piece he was talking about specifically about beef and the idea of beef going from birth to ranch to feed to slaughterhouse to plate, and going in as a investigative journalist is going to get a lot of closed doors in your face. But for him, he went in as an owner of a cow. So he had an asset. He was in the process. That was his journey as an asset owner. And his asset happened to be that calf. But by doing so, he was able to call different ranchers and ask about feed or different grazing lots or vaccinations or logistics and transporting. But we knew as a reader that we were going to go from that calf being born all the way through the slaughterhouse and to his plate. So he described it as a clothesline encompassing those 2 points, which gave the readers a very clear through line and a very clear journey of where they were headed. And because that clarity remained, we never got bogged down by any of the episodes that he decided to hang on that clothesline. He could hang an episode about cattle vaccinations and go as deep as he wanted to, as long as the reader knew we were coming back to that journey. He could talk about grass versus corn and the feed of a cow and all of these different things that he was learning. He could go on these tangents as deep as he wanted and as deep as he investigated, because they hung tightly to that line of the calf is here, the beef on the plate is here. So that clothesline and hanging of the episodes really reminded me of the Odyssey and the want that you and I had been discussing this whole time. What does your character want? What did Odysseus want? Odysseus wants to get home. That is the number one thing that he wants the whole time. The opening of the poem is, he does his best to bring his comrades home. And even though they ate the cattle of the sun god and screwed things up, he wasn't able to bring them home, but he wanted to get home. That was the point the whole time. He wanted to get home. So we were able to follow his journey, no matter how many times he gets knocked off course. He even gets knocked back to the same island twice, and it still holds our attention because we know he is still going in the direction of home. So when Odysseus departs Troy and he's heading back to Ithaca, we know that he can encounter the Cyclops, he can encounter the Sirens, he can encounter the Witch, he can encounter all of these different episodes, and none of it feels like a drag because they get him closer to home. Yes, he's got to figure out how to escape the Cyclops, but it will bring him closer to home. He's got to figure out how to circumvent the sirens, but it will get him closer to home. He's got to figure out how to deal with the Sea Witch, as long as it gets him closer to home. He's got to figure out how to deal with Scylla and Charybdis, and that will get him closer to home. So all of these mini episodes, these mini adventures, they have their own arcs within them, but they all point toward how to get home, which is why, even though they are very literal detours, the story doesn't slacken, because we know where we're going, even if we don't know how we're going to get there. Now, that through line, that clothesline, that is not the same as character growth. The through line and the clothesline does not change, but the character changes. Odysseus changes, and there's a lot of room for growth. At the beginning of that clothesline, which does not change, we have Odysseus, who is pumped that it was his idea of how to win the war at Troy. And then when he gets captured by the Cyclops, and his men get captured by the Cyclops, it is his idea that gets them out of the situation with the Cyclops. And he is riding so high on that achievement that his pride and his glory, he shouts at the Cyclops, "Hey, this was Odysseus who did this to you." And it was that pride that got him into a decade of trouble. Now the Cyclops knew his name, the Cyclops could pray to Poseidon, Poseidon now had a target, it's that Odysseus guy, I'm gonna mess up everything that he's got going on. So it was that pride that got him into trouble. But the prideful man in the beginning turns into someone who is humble and meek out of necessity, because that humility is what allows him to reclaim his home. When he is going through the treacherous waters past Scylla and Charybdis, Athena tells him, don't draw your sword, don't try to fight the monster. You won't be able to win. You just have to accept that you are going to lose some men and go through. And when he's going through past that dragon, he's about to draw his sword, but he remembers that he can't, no matter how hard he tries. He has to be humble about this situation and just push through and accept that he's going to lose some things. Now, when he gets to his house, it is overrun by suitors, these horrible, horrible men who have been destroying what was his home. So he now has to figure out how to get them out, how to clean up his house and return his house to his home. And to do so, he has to humbly disguise himself as a beggar and humbly accept being abused by these suitors while he bides his time and figures out how he is going to clean his house and what his plan is going to be. So he is not the man who just comes in and says, I'm Odysseus, get out, I have the power, I'm the dude, I sacked Troy, I killed the Cyclops, I spent a decade at sea, get out. No. He holds this new man, this new humble man, and accepts all sorts of physical and verbal abuse from these suitors in his home to be able to formulate what he needs to win and to clean up his house. That is a huge arc, a huge, huge character arc, a huge character change. But it's all on that same unchanging through line of, I gotta get home. I wanna get home to my wife and my child. And he has to get to his house, which is no longer his home, and clean it up and reclaim it so he can finally turn it back into his home. So even though he achieves the house part, he still has to go through trials and tribulations to make it once again his home. And I noticed that there's similarities to this clothesline structure in The Hobbit. Bilbo, his whole mission is to go and help the dwarves reclaim their mountain home. That's the through line the whole time. We're going to go reclaim our mountain home. But he's got the episodes of the trolls and getting lost in the woods and the Elven King and the river town, and Bilbo goes from someone who is nervous and inexperienced to nervous and experienced, and finally someone who is confident and experienced. And that character change all happens on that same through line of, I want to help the dwarves reclaim their mountain home. Very similar to the Odyssey. And you see these things in Arthurian legends too, like we want to go claim the Grail. All of these episodes can be hung on that want of, I want to go claim the Grail. And you can run into knights and necromancers and monsters and who knows what else, as long as that through line doesn't change. And like we saw with Odysseus, he can get to his house and we think that it's accomplished, but it's not yet his home. So realizing all of this from everything I've been reading this year, and then the great unlock from Michael Pollan and the How I Write podcast, and our conversation about you constantly reminding me, well, what does your character want? It's not his internal change, it's not his internal want, it's not his internal need. It needs to be something as clear and simple as, I want to get home. I want to get that treasure. I want to help this friend. That is something I want. And that want is a clear North Star that will really keep the story moving. So, in your own work, do all of your scenes point to your character's want? And is your character getting closer or farther from that stated want? And I think it's okay to state it very clearly and very boldly. It'll help the audience get a sense of motion, that we are always going toward a singular place, even if we're knocked off track. All right, man, thank you again. This is, the Odyssey for Writers, Part 1. I don't know what the next part is going to be. I haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm just talking about the book. And there's been so many things written on the book, time and time again. And I'm only presenting what was helpful for me and what impacted me on this read through and how it applied. Okay, the camera cut just as I was ending. So yeah, I'm just giving you what the Odyssey brought to me while I was working on this rewrite. So you can go ahead and look for all sorts of different scholarly things on what the Odyssey has meant for other writers throughout time. I just wanted to give you what it gave to me and how I'm going to approach my next rewrite. All right, talk to you soon, and thanks again. See ya.